Hello, and welcome to the Cryptocurrency News Channel. Today, we are going to talk about Vechain competitors. I know that a lot of you are fans, and all of you say like, "Oh, there's no." A lot of people say, "Oh, there's no, competition for my favorite coin." But we as investors shouldn't be so tunnel visioned. And with any large industry, whether it's remittances, whether it's finances, whether it's supply chain, there are always going to be they're always going to be competitors. And it may not come from the blockchain companies that we know. It may not come from any of the public blockchain companies we know. For instance, remittance, you have Swift, you have other like legacy systems. You also have other developments for supply chain. Obviously, there's Vechain, but then there's also IOTA. But outside of IOTA, there's several private companies that can actually eat up market share because even though they're not exactly the same thing, there are many industries that can use like either or. And if they choose the they choose the permission blockchain or another solution that doesn't use cryptocurrency, they may not use VeChain. So we're going to actually look at some of those. We've discussed many of these in live streams. The live streams are like 2 hours long and they're not really that compact. So we're actually going to look at, we're really going to look at cryptocurrency competitors and also just like blockchain competitors because China has only validated 2 cryptocurrency projects, but they've validated a lot of blockchain projects. So it's not only crypto projects that are competitors. There's a lot of like blockchain competitors that don't have cryptocurrencies that they could actually use. Now there's no tokenomics in there. So, there's problems with that. But some of these are like individualized private or public blockchains for specific purposes. I think some of the bigger threats to VeChain in China are things like Hyperchain, Hyperchain is actually invested by someone that's pretty close to Xi Jinping, and they do have solutions for logistics and for vaccines. Now, I haven't really heard much from Hyperchain, like where there's when or where they've actually been used. But we do know that they actually have solutions for many places in the logistics field. And in China, a lot of stuff is about connections. And since he's a fairly close confidant of Xi Jinping, that actually might produce some trouble for VeChain. He was one of the instrumental people getting like the whole pro-blockchain stuff passed in China. So he does have some influence. So we do need to look out for that. They might eventually be involved somewhat in the vaccine thing and also like in certain logistics. So even though they won't take over VeChain because VeChain has their own, VeChain definitely has their own connections within the government, especially near Shanghai, Hyperchain might actually have enough governmental connections to steal a couple of contracts. So that takes away at some of the market share. It's not critical, but it's something that we need to be aware of. And it's something that if you see something in Chinese media, like Chinese news, please let me know because we are interested in those things. We need to take an overall macro view of the market, including all competitors that could actually come into the market. So Hypechain is one of them. Like these are like, I would say like tier 1 threats. Like I've separated the threats into tiers like 1, 2, and 3. The other one that I would be a tier 1 threat would actually be something like Alibaba chain. I believe this is a public chain that Alibaba probably uses. And it's not really, but it doesn't, I believe, have a cryptocurrency. Alibaba doesn't really believe in cryptocurrencies yet. And this Alibaba chain could actually be pretty problematic because Alibaba is huge in China. It obviously also has governmental support. And obviously, if Alibaba has their own blockchain, they're probably not going to use VeChain for tracking their own logistics, though that already takes away a pretty good market. I know Alibaba has also been involved in the vaccine market, either in Jinan or in Shenzhen, I forgot which one. And just like that, they actually might be competing with VeChain for part of that government contract with vaccines, because they also have a vaccine solution. And I think they've actually deployed or done some localized tests in certain provinces or prefectures. VeChain has done that in the area around Shanghai, but I know that Alibaba has done it in another province or another prefecture. So eventually they might integrate with each other to do this nationalized vaccine blockchain, or they might have, they might integrate it into like, some kind of national scheme, but they might take care of their localities. So that is another possible competitor for VeChain. Alibaba, we know, is huge. They have a lot of influence and they definitely have governmental connections. So that's something we need to actually keep track of, Alibaba chain. And I didn't really know about Alibaba chain until I really started looking at this stuff and other developments in blockchain in China. So it is something to be aware of. If you have any news on that, please let me know. You can always tweet it to me. Now we move on to the second tier of competitors. And one is IBM. Now, IBM would be top tier, but there are a lot of rumors for IBM actually integrating with Vechain to make a hybrid chain, which would be good for Vechain. And there's been several clues, including a conference call and a lot of talks that have been rumored around. So that's why it's a tier 2 threat, because they eventually might be partners. Now, let's not get things mistaken. IBM is huge, and IBM is basically has been deployed in Walmart USA, whereas Vechain's been deployed in Walmart China. So IBM might eventually become a partner of Vechain in the blockchain sector, but let's not get anything twisted or confused. IBM is a huge player, and in other worldwide markets, they might definitely be competitors, and they're very well established. So let's not just say like, oh, IBM's a private chain, it won't bother with Vechain's expansion. Because like I said, there are many companies that could use private or public chains, and if they decide to use IBM in a private chain for now, that might actually hinder Vechain's adoption or section off certain markets. So we need to be aware of that. Now, in other tier 2 stuff, there are like certain companies like Louis Vuitton who uses Vechain and like Da Vinci, but Louis Vuitton, I believe, does use their own private blockchain, maybe with IBM, maybe with someone else in other parts of their company. So one big company that has several different branches, they might not use the same blockchain for every single branch, because a lot of times those separate branches kind of almost operate like separate companies. So like private individual blockchains might actually supplant the need for Vechain in certain companies, in certain sectors, and that would shrink Vechain's adoption as well in that specific company. So we need to watch out for those things. Just because Da Vinci is using Vechain doesn't mean the entire Louis Vuitton brand is actually using Vechain. It is possible, and they might switch in the future, but we know that Louis Vuitton actually has developed like their own chain for right now in a couple of their brands. Now, LVMH, they have actually adopted Vechain in some brands, but in other brands, they might not do so. So we do have to be aware of that kind of competition, because it is really real. Now we move on to the tier 3 competition, and these would be like IOTA and Walton Chain. IOTA, I think, is definitely more threatening than Walton Chain. They do IoT, and they are with Jaguar Land Rover, just like Vechain's with BMW and BYD. And I know Jaguar Land Rover has actually put them on their main site. However, I haven't heard that much IOTA news in the last like half year or so, and their price has been going down because I think mainly because of like the Cordonside thing. It hasn't really gone too well in my opinion, or something like that. I'm not entirely sure about Cordonside and what's going on there, but generally I think IOTA is not quite as far as Vechain in the adoption phase, definitely. And they're doing a lot of tests of like smart cars and stuff, and Vechain's really not in that market right now, and that's more of a futuristic market, and that depends a lot on other technologies like 5G. So that's probably not going to come to for a couple of years, and that's why IOTA is like a tier 3 threat. They're in different localities, and it seems like they're kind of going after different markets as well. Like IOTA is more like futuristic tech, where Vechain is more like supply chain solutions for logistics right now. I know they have like Tangle and stuff. I don't really know how their tokenomics works. I don't really think they have a tokenomics thing. And they're really looking forward to do like IoT, maybe like paying for parking meters, parking garages with IOTA, which Vechain's really not doing. So they're kind of in separate markets. And it looks like they're having a little bit of trouble with Cordonside and all that stuff, and that's why their price is going down. So that's why I kind of see them as a tier 3 threat, because they're not in the same localities, and they're really not quite in the same markets either. Now, Walton Chain is in the same markets, but I consider them a tier 3 threat because I haven't heard really any news from Walton Chain. I know a couple of their fans like jumped on, started like jumping on, especially when Vechain had the security breach a few weeks ago. But I really haven't really heard of any big corporate enterprises actually adopting Walton Chain, which is why I consider them tier 3. Now, if they actually had a lot of adoption, I would actually consider them tier 1. But I've been keeping track of Walton Chain, but I just haven't heard of much news, and it doesn't look like they have that much adoption in the corporate enterprise side. They would definitely get bumped up to tier 2 or tier 1 if they had more adoption, but right now they have to stay tier 3 until they actually get that adoption, because projects without adoption are kind of empty projects. And Walton Chain, like as soon as they get a couple of like big brand name partnerships, they will move up to tier 2 or tier 1 competition. But for right now, they're just tier 3. So those are kind of like the 3 tiers of competition that Vechain has. We definitely shouldn't like scoff at Hyperchain or Alibaba Chain or even IBM. And IOTA Walton Chain, we need to keep back in the back of our minds. I'm sure there are other blockchain projects that focus on logistics, but nothing really else that comes to mind that really concerns me. But please know that Vechain does have competition. There are competitors for certain market shares. They don't have to be public blockchains. And yeah, there's going to be fierce competition in this market. I do believe that Vechain does have a lead, but that does not mean there are no other players. So please don't keep repeating that to yourself, because you're just fooling yourself and you're not being fully aware of all the risks, which as an investor, you should always be exploring, like the entire macro environment and how the system's actually working, including other projects, whether they're private, public blockchains or permission blockchains. So that is the report for today. Let me know what you think, like and subscribe, and hit that bell notifications button. Thank you and have a nice day.